Brynne Kennedy is an entrepreneur, author, and Democratic candidate running for California's 4th Congressional District, which is in Northern California. She is taking on a 10-year incumbent there. And I'm talking to her today because she is the founder and former CEO of a human resources software company called Topia. Topia. I can't even say it right. She's going to tell me how to say it. Her book, Flat, Fluid, and Fast, is about succeeding in a changing economy. And it's a topic you guys are constantly asking me about. I want to talk to her about how to make successful work transitions in the changing COVID economy. Brynne, thank you for your time. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much, Jessica. It's great to be here.
So the company you founded, which tell me how I say it right.
Topia. Utopia. It actually means place in Greek. That's how to remember it.
Ooh, I like that. Now I'm not going to forget.
And the reason we named it Topia when we rebranded is because we supported work from everywhere, all places. So it's called Place.
That's why it's remarkable, because you founded this long before COVID. You were focused on, as you're saying, work from anywhere. And now obviously it's not only the vogue, but it's the necessity. How did you get into this space to begin with?
Well, I started my career as an investment banker, and I worked all over the world. And I saw with that we were increasingly working from all different places and in all different ways. And no one had really built a company to tackle the logistics and all of the things that go with that. So I built Topia, and what the company does is it connects people to good paying jobs and helps organizations manage people working in all different ways, pretty much from everywhere.
Can you give us some tips? Like, what do we need to do to set ourselves up for more success as remote workers? And like, how do you build trust with a new coworker you've never met in person?
Yeah, it's interesting because what all the research shows is that there's a much bigger emphasis on communication. You know, we're used to working in an environment where you sort of run into someone in an elevator or at the coffee stand and you share information, or everyone's sitting around a table. When you're working from your house, you have to recognize that everyone's not a part of those conversations. So it puts a much greater onus on using messaging systems like a Slack or email or whatever it is you use in your business, and actually writing things so that other people can digest them at a different time period. And those are just changing the norms and behaviors of a particular organization. And, you know, that is an adaptation that is needed and people go through, but it's pretty easy to do if it starts from the top and you have an intention within the organization of success.
Do you have advice for business leaders on how they should shift their management right now to make remote work function well for their teams? Sounds like that's what you know.
Yeah, I mean, I have like a very detailed playbook around this in my book, so I'd encourage people who are really interested in that to pick that up. But in summary, I mean, it starts from the top, right? If you want to be serious about making remote work, you have to set those norms as a business leader, and you have to emulate them. You have to not, be concerned about whether you're seeing someone you need to trust but verify, instead of feeling like you need to be looking at someone every day for the fact that they're doing their work. You need to set norms like everyone dials into a video conference for some people being together and others not. Everyone writes up their meeting and puts it on Slack so that those who couldn't join can read it. Many companies will set sort of specific time zone overlap if they're working across places so that people are all online at the same time. There's all kinds of specific norms, but it's just like any other aspect of culture. You have to define it and emulate it as a leader to make it happen.
And it sounds like you have to set some uniform guidelines and emphasize that we need to really over communicate sometimes.
Exactly.
Do you think that the changes we're seeing in the workplace are temporary because of COVID, or do you imagine that post-COVID, this is going to be our new norm? Like, do we require the collaboration we have in an office so much that we'll prefer to go back to work when this is over?
I think about it more over the longer term as like a rubber band. So people separate and they will work remotely, and they will value that flexibility or value living out of a city and being a part of a smaller community. But then we come back to sort of build that trust or do a team event or set goals together. That's what you see from businesses already who work in a more distributed fashion, is people do work from everywhere, but there's a quarterly planning session where there's an emphasis on team building and building those relationships that you can have as the basis of broader virtual work.
Could you speak to the ways working remotely can stimulate the economy, but in different and new ways that are unexpected?
The main thing is that if you or I, for example, decide that we can connect to a broader economy from anywhere in the country, and we don't necessarily need to move to an urban coastal environment, many of us will choose to live in places that are more rural or where we grew up or closer to family or where housing is more affordable. And what that means is that you're in that community. So you are then spending money locally in that community, and that creates jobs. Statistically, it creates 4 local service economy jobs for 1 creative economy virtual job. And it's why you see certain states trying to attract these remote workers. Vermont is a good example. Vermont actually paid people $5,000 a year if they would work remotely from Vermont as a pilot to create local jobs in the community. That's the most tangible example I've seen as a policy way to do this. But the reason for that is it creates so much local stimulus in areas where there are not big companies, or there is not the same jobs engine as there might be in an urban coastal environment.
So it could lead to more space in the cities and more affordable housing for you and me.
Exactly.
That sounds like a pleasant future. I'm curious, what is it like running for office remotely? Are you doing in-person events? How do you do this?
I mean, literally everything that we just talked about. I mean, I know so much about running an organization that is distributed, and a campaign in this environment is exactly the same thing. So I would say I'm probably the best positioned candidate in the country to run a campaign like this. So, no, we're not really doing in-person events. We're doing Zoom events. The team works in a distributed way, and from home in many instances. We use Slack as an example, just like we did in my company, to communicate. Our volunteers use Slack to communicate. So, we're innovating in the political side, just like the private sector is.
Well, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. It is great to see a woman with your ability decide to run for office and get behind public service. And that's what we need to see more of in this country. So thank you.
Thank you so much.